So what are the most important scales that will help you improvise over jazz standards? Let's talk about that. So when I talk about scales, I like to keep things very simple. So I'm just gonna be going over what I consider to be the most important scales over the 5 qualities of 7th chords. 7th chords being the most common chords in jazz standards. And rather than just listing them off for you one at a time, we're going to use the song Stella by Starlight as an example. Stella sounds like this. I do want you to stick around to the very end of the video where I'm gonna give a very important disclaimer about scales and show you how you can start making scales actually musical. So stick around to the very end. Okay, so whenever I'm making choices about what scales to play over chords, I'm not thinking about what scale do I play over one chord. I'm thinking about the harmonic context, and that's what informs my scale making decision. So in the case of Stella by Starlight, the first 2 chords are E minor 7 flat 5 and A7. So E minor 7 flat 5 and A7. And whenever I see a half diminished chord starting, followed by a dominant 7th chord, I know that this is a 2-5 in a minor key, okay? So half diminished followed by a dominant 7. And in this case, it's unresolved. It doesn't resolve to a 1 chord. It would resolve to a D minor 7. It doesn't do that in this particular case. However, having that context and harmonic understanding, then I can start making choices over what to do over these chords. So over top of half diminished chords, minor 7 flat 5 chords, one of the most common choices and easiest choices is the Locrian scale or the Locrian mode. And it sounds like this. Okay, now Locrian, it sounds scary. It's the 7th mode of the major scale. And really all that means is that it is related to a major scale that has the 7th or the lead tone relating to it. So E would be the last tone of some major scale. And we know that to be F major, right? So E to F, that's the last, the 7th to the root again. So we're really just playing the F major scale when we're playing E Locrian. So that's a little bit of help to understand what notes to play if you already know your major scale. Now, a close second choice over top of half diminished chords would be simply to sharp this F natural, and now we have a Locrian sharp 2 scale, which sounds like this. Just simply sharpening that second tone of the Locrian scale will give us that result, and it's another great choice to make over half diminished chords. Now over top of this A7, while it's not the most basic scale or the basic choice, I actually like to think of altered scales over top of dominant 7th chords that I know are going to resolve to a minor 7th chord. And the reason I do make that choice, or I think about it that way, is because when you listen to professional jazz musicians improvise, often they're playing a lot of altered ideas over top of, right, over top of those 5-to-1 relationships in minor keys. So the altered scale, or in this case, the A altered scale, sounds like this. So the altered scale is a great choice to play over dominant 7th chords, 5 chords that resolve to a minor key. Okay, again, we want to be looking at our harmonic context of Stella. So we go back to our chords analysis and we see that the next 2 chords are C minor 7, F7, right? So what would we play over those? So when I look at that, a C minor 7 to F7, that looks like a 2-5 to B flat major. Now again, this particular progression doesn't resolve. This happens a lot in Stella by Starlight. However, with that context in mind, I can begin to make choices. And one of the most basic choices to make over top of any 2 chord in a major key would be Dorian. So in this case, C Dorian would sound like this. Okay, now Dorian is the 2nd mode of the major scale. So if we think C, what is C the 2nd scale tone of in a major scale? It's B flat major. So really the C Dorian scale is just like I'm playing the B flat major scale, just starting on the C note, okay? So C Dorian for that. Now, looking ahead, we have another 5 chord, a dominant 7th chord, but I'm actually gonna make a different choice here. While I could play the altered scale, Mixolydian is just a basic scale to play over top. So Mixolydian sounds like this, so F Mixolydian. Now, Mixolydian, it's the 5th mode of the major scale, so we're thinking F is the 5th tone of what scale And again, if we're doing our math right, it is B flat major. So C minor 7 and F7 are all related to B flat major. But another easy way to think of that Mixolydian scale is like a major scale with a flat 7 in it, which defines that dominant 7th chord really well, okay? So that's Dorian over top of 2 chords in major keys and Mixolydian over 5 chords in major keys. Now, just to reinforce some of my decision making here, we have F minor 7, B flat 7 to E flat major 7 as the next chords. The melody goes like this. F minor 7 to B flat 7 to E flat major 7. So that's a 2-5-1 in E flat major. So again, over the 2, we can play F Dorian. Over the B flat 7, the 5 chord, we can play Mixolydian. And then over the E flat major 7, we can play Ionian. Now, Ionian is just another fancy way to say the major scale. So E flat major. Now, this A flat 7 chord, it's kind of interesting, and there's a lot of theoretical analysis we could put into this. Technically, it's what we call a backdoor dominant, meaning it's actually resolving to this chord right here, the B flat major chord. Right? But I won't go too deep into that right now. But when you see a dominant 7th chord just kind of hanging out right there, again, just a basic choice like the Mixolydian would be a great choice. So that'd be A flat Mixolydian. Now I want to fast forward really quickly to bars 10 and 11, where we have an E minor 7 flat 5, an A7, and a D minor 7. And the melody goes like this. Okay, so that's a 2-5-1 in D minor, and we already know that we can play the Locrian over top of the E minor 7 flat 5, the altered scale over the A7, and then over top of the D minor 7 1 chord, a good choice could be Aeolian, which is really just a natural minor scale. So D natural minor is a great choice over top of a 1 chord. However, you can also play a Dorian scale over top of minor 1 chords. You can also play melodic minor over top of those chords if you want that kind of minor major 7th sound. It all works. I just think Aeolian is a really simple one to go for. So now we've covered 4 qualities of 7th chords at this point. We're only missing 1. So we have our major 7th chords. We can play Ionian or major. Our minor 7th chords, if it's a 2 chord, we can play Dorian, or if it's a 1 chord, we can play Aeolian, Dorian, or melodic minor. Now, we also have dominant 7. So dominant 7, we could play an altered scale if it's resolving to a minor chord. And we can also play Mixolydian if it's resolving to a major chord. Over top of our half diminished chords, we can play either the Locrian scale or the Locrian sharp 2 scale. So before we continue, what I'd love to hear from you in the comments or the show notes below is, what scales do you think are most important for jazz improvisation? And what are your favorite ones that you find the most useful? Would love to hear your thoughts. Now, the 5th quality of 7th chord is the fully diminished 7th chord, and there's not a fully diminished 7th chord in the jam session chord changes of Stella by Starlight. But for example, in Have You Met Miss Jones, there's an F major 7 to an F sharp diminished 7 to a G minor 7 to a C7. And so what can we play over top of that F sharp diminished 7th? Well, the most basic scale that you can play over a diminished 7th chord is the whole half diminished scale. And it sounds like this. One disclaimer about playing the whole half diminished scale is I think it can sound kind of strange when you're improvising unless you're explicitly targeting those chord tones. So when using the diminished 7th and playing the whole half diminished, focus more on the actual chord tones than you are the notes in between, and thinking about the notes in between as simple resolutions to those chord tones. And again, the whole half really just means that the scale is made up of whole steps and half steps. So here's a really important disclaimer about using scales when it comes to jazz improvisation. I like to think of scales as kind of like training wheels. So think of when you have training wheels when you're learning how to ride a bike. It's really useful to get you up and going and started. And if you didn't have them, it may be very difficult for you to learn how to ride that bike. But after a while, you need to take those training wheels off and start going to the next thing. And one thing that you can do is use strategies that will help you make scales musical. So I actually have a video on the screen right now that'll help you do that. It's some exercises that explicitly help you take scales through multiple different levels and make them musical and turn into actual jazz solos. So do make sure you click on that video and move on to that one. So that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you found it valuable, make sure you like the video and make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.